Hello, good morning. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain. What's up?
Oh, yes, it's a beautiful Wednesday morning from here in Lagos.
And look who's back.
Yeah, it's a full house.
I guess that's what makes it beautiful, really. Good morning, I'm Ayo Makide. See you guys again. And hey, you, what happened to you? I can say mine now because by the time I went away, that's when you came back. So.
You know, if it was in the evening, I would have said, is it coming from the B parlor? But it's early morning, so it's the T parlor.
Wow. Early morning shots.
Incidentally, I've not taken my cup of choco this morning, okay. So.
Oh, you missed our report from Cross River.
Oh, yeah, he did. So maybe he should have a look at that.
Ecom chocolate,
I'm
right?
sure that maybe one of those will be glad about it.
Yeah.
And speaking about being glad, I mean, yesterday we did highlight the unfortunate incident of, remember those police pensioners in Kaduna who were complaining about that contributory pension scheme that they've been on when the law was made. They said it violated certain provisions and that they have been on that scheme for over 20 years, and so you can't just have that retroactive action. And so they thought that something needed to be done about it. And we did ask who was listening, and it turns out that some members in the House of Representatives, they actually listened and paid attention to that, and that is heartwarming for a lot of people.
Okay. Most certainly. You know, why you guys raised the issue yesterday, something Mark said that struck me, and I was very happy that it was mentioned. And that's the fact that, you know, there is this African saying from the Southwest that when a certain kind of death is killing some people around you, it's a proverb for you. So, as she began to mention the fact that, look, what is happening to the policemen in out of service is a kind of proverb for the policemen in service. It only reminded me of what happened to the civil servants in the days of Murtala Muhammad, you know.
That's how it all started.
Beg your pardon?
How it all started.
Exactly.
Things just went all right.
So, that's, you know, mass sack or retrenchment or retirement of them, you know, was really, really very, very disturbing. And
that's a rude shock. It was
absolutely.
Never in the cup.
And a number of people would say that's actually the origin of corruption in the civil service. And so if this kind of thing would happen to policemen who have, according to the member of representatives whom you would listen to shortly, have served for 35 years, could be having this kind of experience, and as he said also in the report, you'll see, looking wretched. It definitely isn't something that we want to see, especially for people in whose hands we place our lives.
Absolutely. And, you know, when we have these conversations, these kinds of conversations, it's always important to sort of balance it. I mean, this is something we want to see, especially what's happening at the National Assembly, expediting action, ensuring that they get the best when it comes to welfare and the rest. But there's also another side, and I think Mark referenced that yesterday. You know, just as we were talking about, you know, better welfare for police, I mean, another story came out. This was in Ibadan, by the way, about a DPO that allegedly assaulted a press person. And that was in Ibadan, DPO of the Yagoko police station, I should say. And, you know, these are some of the sour points of policing in Nigeria that, you know, when you want to go all out and fight for the police, you recall some of these incidents. I've had my own share of incidents as well. Same way I've had, you know, policemen come to my rescue, as it were. So it's also, I mean, we should also appreciate the fact that there's a lot of work that needs to be done when it comes to the conduct of policemen. Because when you see that video, this man was assaulted, he was beaten. And this is, I mean, he didn't even say I'm a press person. So imagine the average, I mean, the everyday person who does not have an ID card and the rest. Imagine what they have to go through. So also we need to look at that area and ensure that we're not winning on the one hand and losing on the other.
You know, my apologies, Chimali. You say for that one, and this is something that I say often. Usually, to a large extent, it's not about the institutions. Usually, it's a lot more about the individual. There is something kind of screwed into the heads of some people that whenever they have the privileged position or a privileged opportunity, they think that they can do, they are the be-all and do-all. That's not the case. If the pressman, for instance, wanted to use his own power, he would have made a call to his NUJ colleagues to just go down to that same police station and do whatever it is that one could do. So sometimes it's in the individuals. I mean, just as you, a number of us would have said that there have been cases that we've had wonderful experiences with policemen. There was a day I had to call the present PPRO of the police, Frank Kumba. I called him, like, your guys are doing very well at the OPIC Link Bridge. He said, Ayo, you see, some of us, I mean, some of us, we are doing these things very well. It's not all doom. Sometimes it's all gloom. But then there is some boom. No doubt about that. But whichever it is, let there be a system that takes care of the police. A system that gives them something to look forward to during service and after service. Otherwise...
for some reason, I just think that at some point in the history of this country, we will have that conversation about reorganization of the security architecture in this country. I think we will. So as long as whichever generation wants to play the ostrich, they can do that all they want. But we will have that conversation because it's natural. Just look at the times, look at the trend. You will see that certain things are just taking shape. And so it will happen. But then, we did start out by talking about the assembly because they appealed to the National Assembly to listen to their cry, to weigh in. And here's some of what was said yesterday.
Meanwhile, lawmakers in the House of Representatives want the Nigeria police to be excluded from the contributory pension scheme.
The armed forces, the DSS, the intelligence agencies are not part of the Contributory Pension Act. When the Nigerian police was brought under this act, the aim was to ensure that they get enhanced welfare, both while they are serving and at retirement. But Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, this has not been the case.
What I saw yesterday in Kaduna on television, police officer that served 35 years. When you're looking rated, Mr. Speaker, looking rated.
I have it.
The bill scales second reading as lawmakers insist that if passed, it will serve as a positive motivation for better service delivery. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Way to go. Way to go.
I look forward to
well
the
done.
speed.
Yeah, because they need to see that through. Yeah. So that, that's just what this whole thing is about. If people raise certain things, their representatives look at it to ensure that, the society gets better.
And we've seen bills being passed, first reading, second reading, and in a week, they're done with it. Record speed. So,
I'm particularly happy with the fact that it was referenced that, okay, people are listening. People are paying attention. So please let it not be selective. Let it just be
Don't mind him just being a journalist. It's allowed. So that can happen because we're always 100% of certain things.
Oh, come on.
It's a society. You will always find one or two things areas where we can improve upon. And so when we highlight that, we're all going to be happy for it at the end of the day. So you can imagine flying that green and white flag, thumping your chest when things are going very well. That's what everybody dreams of.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be fantastic when that happens. So way to go. So you know what they say when you can be an Oliver Twist. But let's go to the dailies and see.
Maybe I've been an Oliver Twist this morning.
Let's see what the dailies highlight and see what else can we improve upon. We'll start with Vanguard newspaper today. Oh, they're not short of reminding us of that one. Policy somersault drive auto industry off the roads. Ooh.
Intended.
Yeah, this is...
Not again.
Oh boy, I know, right? Chinese brands make inroads. 500 billion naira new investments rot away. Investors move to Ghana. Dealers see further decline, blame policy environment. And much as the authorities will tell you, look, our auto policy is certain things, we want to do this, we don't have capacity to meet up with this, but bottom line is this. We should have at the back of our minds, look, even if whatever country, look at these countries that are making inroads, China, as reported here, they were once upon a time worse than where we are today. But then they sat together and thought, look, we have to do these things, or we could be non-existent at some point. And so they pulled together and did these kind of things. Remember when even those Asian brands made roads into the States at that time, decades ago, they were usually very apprehensive, saying, look, what is it with these cars? Today, you have what you refer to, all these American specs. This is this.
It only goes to vision. it only goes to direction. I mean, you just as you quoted, you remember when Chinese phones first came into business? into the country. You can just imagine, the speakers, the way they sounded and all, but look at it now.
Okay. And I think it's worth mentioning, for a lot of Nigerians, it's quite challenging. I'm trying to get the
shots fired.
I'm trying to get out of my head. But that's the beauty of
development.
Yeah, development really. And let me be honest with you about this auto policy. I mean, you find a lot of Nigerians now importing accidented vehicles for cheaper, and we need to build the industry here in Nigeria. So how would you convince that person who can get, and let me be honest, who can get an accidented vehicle for what, $1,000, $1,500, ships it in, and at the end of the day he spends like 3 million naira and he has a fairly good car.
You know what?
But you have to buy a new car. How much would you spend?
What is really disturbing about these guys is, look, it's not for lack of potential, not for lack of capacity. At least, I mean, we have referenced here several assembly points in this country, in the north, in the south, in the southeast, in different regions of the country. And we have individuals that are doing stuff like this already now. Just in Lagos here, we talked about an electric car being assembled. That young man that we featured on, Channels Television, some months ago, it's not for lack of capacity, it's not for lack of innovation, it's not for lack of ingenuity, it's not for lack of potential. It's for this policy thing that you have mentioned. I'm just hoping that someone somewhere is looking forward to another 20 years from now. Are we still going to be where we are now?
We just hope that at some point, I don't know the kind of policy or politics we play with economic matters, but at the end of the day, we ought to remember that if it doesn't benefit the entire country, at some point, look, if it's a tripod, if one leg isn't working, you know that there is a problem. So, that said, Buhari met Okonjo-Iweala in New York. That's a caption of that picture you see on the front page. So the president is going to address the General Assembly. Looking forward to that this week. So keep your eye on that one. And then you also see Northwest development indices closer to those of Afghanistan. El-Rufai. What does that mean?
Wow.
Oh, okay. That's a danger signal.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
That is a danger signal.
Oh, yes. And don't forget, we have the Northeast Development Commission. So are we looking at a wider commission for development? But, these things are just a given when it comes to governance.
That is serious. We need to, at least, these are signals and signs that proverbs, possibly, if we could. Well, that's Vanguard today.
Well, for the Nigerian Tribune, the lead story is on banditry. 7 northern states to recruit 3,000 vigilantes. So I don't know if this is a Amotekno type of, arrangement or the Ebo. Where's Ebo Bago, by the way?
Well,
it's in the southeast.
Who knows if it's operational? Is it operational?
Safe answer.
Who knows?
Well, he says it's in the southeast. Of course we know it's in the southeast.
Oh, really? It is?
Just to get an update, really.
And that's why, I kept on talking about, we'll have that conversation in this country, because I don't know which state doesn't have a form of policing, which is different from what the law says. There shall be one Nigeria police force. There are several other agencies that are doing policing functions in different guises all over the country. Yet, we don't want to talk about some of these things.
It's only a matter of time, really. We see the riders, reps lament influx of bandits to Sokoto, Kogi, Abia. That's the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. Bandits displace 30 villages in Sokoto. I'll just read that again for effect. Bandits displace 30 villages in Sokoto. That's on page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune. And of course, that picture, you see the president meeting with the WTO DG and Foreign Affairs Minister. It's a lot on the front page, but Okonjo-Iweala meets Buhari in New York, mobilizes vaccine manufacturers to Nigeria. We did speak with our correspondent, our State House correspondent in New York, Gloria Mezoke, who's been giving us blow-by-blow account, as they say, of what's going on there. Let me just take this one on a final note. 20% of Nigerians lost jobs in 2020. That's according to a UNDP report. 73% businesses suffered cash crunch despite 2.3 trillion naira intervention. But guess what? There are businesses that actually made profits during that same period. So it's a mixed bag, really. But I would say that a lot more people were hit by COVID-19. Page 6 of the paper, there's sports on the back page.
That's right.
It was quite painful seeing the outcome of that match against Bayana.
Can focus on my boy right there, Osimhen.
Ladies first. Ladies first.
The ladies win?
No. It was quite painful. I did tell you I knew what the outcome was going to be. I just
we need
tried
to
to hold
edge
on.
mindset of victory. Winners mindset and mindset of people. That's why I'm talking about the boy right there.
Okay, so let's take that one for you. Osimhen is a deadly striker.
That's what's up.
Spalletti. Okay, that's the Nigerian Tribune.
Well, talking about keeping our eyes on victory, I don't know if this is one. It's completely different from what you guys have been talking about.
Oh.
Nigerians groan as cooking gas prices soar. Well, that's what you have on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. Despite huge reserve, Nigerians groan as cooking gas price keeps soaring. And guess what? Marketers blame Forex, VAT, low supply. NNPC says will soon increase supply. That's what you have on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. And
Well, you know that the CBN will always be the whipping boy. So if anybody blames any Forex, CBN, where's my Forex? If anybody, CBN, what's happening here? And CBN,
And they've had to respond to a lot of, issues.
Well, that's their CBN.
Oh, yes.
So,
Well, think about
they can't
this.
get tired of responding.
Absolutely, that's the job. So you go to the market, prices of foodstuff, of course, you know what they say.
They blame Forex.
And then you come home to cook, and then the price of gas.
it's Forex. Even the price of cooking of firewood, which is, of course, going extinct.
And that's because, look, we've been talking about diversification of the economy for decades. Where are we on that? So if we're dependent on one major source of revenue, which is based on foreign exchange, you'll always talk about Forex.
Well, we won't stop talking about those things. Right under the nameplate, school children in captivity, you still have a countdown. Federal government called it burning Yori in 98 days. Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, 80 days, beg your pardon. And right under that one, El-Rufai mocks Southern governors, says anti-open grazing law not implementable. Find the story on page 4. Bandits outnumber security personnel, says Masari. Eliminate them at all costs. Governor Emir tell FG. Find the story on page 8 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Good morning, Mark.
Well, Ayo, it's good to see you. Welcome back. I think it's time for me to go on leave as well. Because you look so good back from this leave. And good morning, gentlemen. I'm sure you're happy to have Ayo back. Welcome to our viewers who are watching us here in Abuja as well. Let's take a look at what the leadership has on the front page for you. The story on the front page of Daily Trust. I can tell you that women can write, an epistle on it about cooking gas. I know that recently I went to buy cooking gas and there was a leaflet, there was a newsletter from the cooking gas company I buy cooking gas from, and it was for free, and they were trying to explain to us why the price of cooking gas has, just gone through the roof. Not gone to the roof, but gone through the roof. The litany just continues. But as I did say, let's take a look. I'm sorry about that. Let's take a look at what leadership has on the front page for you. 36 days after assent, PMB 6 amendment to PIA. That's the lead story. Says, Act makes no provision for federal character, political appointees as board members, ignores outcry over 3% for host communities, nominates board members for Upstream Regulatory Commission, EFCC, others. Experts react. So you have all the details on page 4 of the paper. 36 days after assent, PMB 6 amendment to PIA. So we'll see how that eventually pans out. Look at this one. Northwest governors engage 3,000 vigilantes to combat banditry. So it looks like they're coming back together again. The Northwest governors had come together on under one initiative before, initially, But somehow it was seemed that pact, after the operation ended, banditry came back. They couldn't get it together again, but looks like from the look of things now, perhaps they're beginning to do so. Northwest governors engaged 3,000 vigilantes to combat banditry. Senate mulls life imprisonment for kidnappers. It's a page 7 read. It used to be the death sentence, at least in many states. But now the Senate, that's the Senate at the federal level, is thinking about, but there's no Senate at state level, don't mind me, but, you know, at the federal level, in terms of a law specifically for kidnapping, they're thinking of life imprisonment. Our youths must be given jobs, Oshibajo tells African leaders. And you have a number of other stories there. Flood displaces several families in Rivers. That's on the front page. Corporate bodies, security agencies endorse editors' conference. They have that as well. And a bit of politics. But look at this. 2 of 10 employed Nigerians out of job in 2020 is a report. You might want to read that story on page 4. Let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
News Direct is the next one we've got for you here this morning, and the headline, you know, kind of different a little bit, but yeah, they also reference that PIA. Balanced geopolitical representation. Buhari seeks amendment of PIA. So, and then you see, board without ministers makes NNPC commercial entity Oyebanji. Amendment shows Buhari is flexible, Faribe. And then you also see, yeah, quite a number of other stories. Yeah, fiscal federalism. Lagos seeks special status in revenue formula. So, among several other matters. Senate passes bill to control sickle cell disease in Nigeria. It'll be interesting to pay attention to that because, I mean, there are those who were talking about trying to link it with being careful, knowing the kind of, if you have any such symptoms, you need to be sure you consult your medical practitioner before you go for the jab, the COVID jab, or else it might have some adverse effects. So all of those medical decisions, they say you need to take with a professional. That's News Direct this morning, though.
Well, take a look at the Daily Times. Daily Times with this one on VAT. North can survive without billions accruing to southern states, NEF. So, again, the NEF speaks on not the issue.
Coming through about this. Sometimes you just wonder, does it mean, okay, fine, the court might as well go ahead, pass the VAT law, yeah, the states can go ahead and collect and remit, because it has different interpretations. And remember, NEF too, different political jabs, people are taking political jabs these days, saying, look, what's the article about the spokesperson of NEF about citizenship, whether or not is all of those jabs are flying everywhere.
And you wonder, is this the time? I mean, should that be the attention? Should that be the approach? Or we just take this in good faith and just take it as part of nation building?
I know that the presidency has lashed out at NEF before, saying that well, they don't have fellowship, they don't have...
They don't speak for the North?
Yeah, they asked that question too. That's what their members, like it's a soldier without a general, without soldiers or troops. So look, there are different things.
We seem to nitpick on issues as we are interested, or but not as it concerns us. As we are interested, not as it concerns us. Look, should we be talking about North-South dichotomy as opposed to one united Nigeria?
Yeah. Good point.
It's about time we got around, you know, to all of those things. Poverty is a national problem.
It doesn't recognize...
Exactly. As I often say, money has no feelings. Poverty is a national problem. Corruption is a national problem. All these issues, they happen in the South as they happen in the North. So insecurity is a national problem. About time we really stopped to nitpick on all of these things. This VAT or no VAT thing, let's look at the viability of the states. Let every state do the things that are needful for themselves.
So the elite should grow up. I mean, I'm not talking to you if you haven't grown up.
I think if
you have grown up.
I think a crucial thing here is what you said about us having the necessary conversations.
Yeah.
Those conversations are necessary. They are important. It's one thing to have what the law says. It's another thing for us to implement the laws. We do not lack policies in this country. We only lack equitable or a proper implementation of them. For instance, look at the National Youth Policy my God, if that policy was implemented to the letter, all youths in Nigeria will have jobs.
So they can play politics all they want. So, but at the end of the day, is the life of the average citizen, maybe from 1999 till date, is it better than what it used to be?
That's 21 years ago.
So,
we started this Fourth Republic. What's going to happen in another 20 years from now if we don't do the needful?
Again, I say welcome back. I didn't even get to take the riders, but that's the daily time.
The time is up.
This morning.
Well, he's giving us our today time. So, anyway, so there you go.
Well, Daily Independent says this one. 2023 election, Jega Ahmed Duke Utomi lead move to upstage APC government. Here we go again. That story is on page 4 and a number of others you'll find on the front page.
Yeah, okay. That's it then. We'll look at some of the dailies here this morning. But stay with us because we will be right back. Okay, welcome back. Yes, indeed, we'll be discussing a subject matter that has raised some dust in some quarters. And so we've got Mr. Babajide Odusolu joining us today. He's a former special assistant and former managing director of OPIC. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Good morning, gentlemen, and Maupe in Abuja.
Right. So just before that, let's just give a little bit of highlight and see those allegations making the rounds, which the State House of Assembly did level against your person. The first of which they talked about this sudden unaccounted balance of just a little over 2.5 billion naira. And then they say that the sum of 40 million naira was unaccounted for in year 2019. And then there was, you expanded unbudgeted sum of 881.5 million naira, and they also say the proposed there was a proposed 5-star hotel which is supposed to be in Ikeja. It had no physical existence, yet a whopping sum of over 45 billion was expended to obtain title documents and the selling of 8.2 hectares of land at Isheri to Rainy Hill Limited at an undervalued price of 164 million naira. So the house that they sat, they had this committee on public account, there was auditor's report, and they said that these are the things that they found you wanting for while you were in office. What's going on?
Thank you so much for that brief summary. First, my name is Babajide Odusolu. I was a special advisor, property and investment to the former governor of Ogun State, Senator Bikola Amosun, and concurrently the managing director of OPIC. As you rightly surmised, these allegations were made by the State House of Assembly's Committee on Public Accounts. My first knowledge of this issue was October 6, 2020, when I got a letter, quite a friendly letter actually. I have a copy and I can show you if you want to see it or you want to put it on the screen for people to see. A friendly letter that basically said they were doing a review of the activities of the corporation and they requested my assistance to provide clarification on some issues that had arisen during that course of that review. I got to the house on the 13th of October, only to be confronted with a letter purportedly issued by a memo purportedly issued by the Auditor General's office that basically said there were 25 infractions against the corporation, and that I was culpable for them because I'd been obstructing the audit of the corporation. Of course, and this was all recorded. It was actually recorded. And before I even go on, the first thing that I find strange is that here I am, sitting in your studio, ready to answer your questions, and the State House of Assembly that published these allegations is not here. I don't know why they're not here.
Yeah, so on that, we actually reached out to the state government and the State House of Assembly. So the government says, look, we've not received this document as of yet, so we cannot make any comment yet. But the Assembly, the Chairman House Committee on Public Accounts, did say, look, they've got a training to do today out of town, but that they unfortunately can't make it. So we're hoping that they'll make it at a later date, and all of these matters will be addressed.
And that is where it gets more curious. So, and the reason why I say it gets more curious is before I go back to the actual proceeding, there is a law setting up OPIC. It's a 1984 law because OPIC is a 38-year-old corporation. That law, and I have a copy here, and I can give it to you. You can basically scroll it on here if you want, mandates the governor, who is the supervising authority over OPIC, to appoint a managing director who has the oversight of the day-to-day management of OPIC and gives the corporation the authority to run its business. It gives the corporation the authority to render accounts of its business to the governor and to run all its affairs. Nowhere in that law does it obligate us to report to the House of Assembly. As a matter of fact, the truth is the House of Assembly does have oversight authority over all affairs of states, but they do not have supervisory authority over OPIC. So going back to what happened...
Well, in other words, OPIC cannot render accounts to the State
We
Assembly?
do not. The law specifically says, if I can read it out, it says in Article 25, the corporation shall cause to be kept proper accounts in respect of its functions under this law and other records in relation thereto. Prepare in respect of each period of 12 months, here referred to as the financial year terminating on the 31st day of December, a statement of accounts in any such form as may be approved by the governor. And then it goes on to say that 24 says the annual report. The corporation shall submit an annual report of its activities for each year to the governor.
So does that mean then that the OPIC, when you report to the governor, you do not report to any other authority?
We are like any other corporation. We render annual accounts. And those annual accounts are submitted to the office of the governor.
The point here being that even the House of Assembly has oversight over the office of the governor.
Correct.
Over the executive.
And that's
so
what I'm saying.
consequently, that would say that they have oversight over all activities of the executive.
Correct. Correct. Oversight. There's a difference between oversight and actually then trying to exercise supervisory function.
So when you appeared before the committee,
yes,
on what basis did you appear?
I was invited. And as a citizen of Ogun State, respecting the authority as the Assembly of Ogun State, I went there. I got there and they had audit queries.
As a citizen or as former...
As a former MD of OPIC, I had no reason to appear. I could easily, if I had anything to hide, I could have declined the invitation.
But your testimony was not as a normal citizen.
Yeah, because so I got there and they said I was being invited to assist them with a review. So I went there thinking I was coming in there to clarify and assist them with a review. At no point in time was I subpoenaed. At no point in time was I issued a list of queries saying I, Babajide Odusolu, personally am guilty or suspected or allegedly had done anything that needed to account for. They said they were reviewing OPIC and they needed clarity from me on some activities that happened while I ran OPIC.
So in your opening, does that suggest, when you say they don't have that function over OPIC, are you suggesting that if they have any queries or any questions, if anybody's to answer to whatever might have gone wrong in OPIC, it has to be the governor?
What I'm saying is, so we submit our annual accounts to the Auditor General. The General can review it and raise queries and seek clarification from OPIC. If OPIC is then stalling or says, oh, this is wrong or that is wrong and this person is guilty, then the House can then step up and say, okay, we're setting up a committee, we're reviewing this, we're investigating it. But it will be clearly articulated. And just like what you said at the beginning, if the governor is saying, I have not seen this report, I am not aware of these allegations, I have not seen the substance of what is being alleged, how can the House then, on its own, without having the expertise in-house, say they've audited our accounts, they've reviewed it, they've conducted a forensic analysis, they've discovered that resources are missing, and I am guilty?
I thought that they referenced, because every year, correct us if it's wrong, there's an audit of OPIC activities.
So
they said they leveraged on that, and that is what they found from those yearly audits.
So here, for example, is the audit conducted in 2017 on OPIC. This is the one conducted in 2018. This audit firm is appointed by the Office of the Auditor General of the state. I do not appoint the auditor. I have no control over the auditor. Nothing in this audit report supports the claims of the House of Assembly. Nothing. There is nowhere in this audit report where there is any allegation of any malfeasance, financial irregularity, or missing funds. What you would find, as would happen in any other business, there would always be audit queries. These audit queries will say, oh, maybe you're not keeping enough vouchers, or maybe your systems are antiquated, they need to be upgraded, or maybe, for example, one of the charges that they said was that, oh, we had ledgers that were now not legible. They said we had dormant accounts, and that they said that there were some assets that were undervalued and we should revalue them. Okay, those are the kind of normal per course queries that you get in the audit query, and then you respond to them. So what the House did was they raised these queries on the 13th of October. I took my time to elucidate and walk them through all the issues in my capacity as the former MD who was responsible for the corporation. We adjourned, and they requested that OPIC should provide them all the backup information to support the answers I gave them. I went away. They called me back on the 9th of November saying they needed additional clarification. Before that day, I left there, and the next thing I saw in the papers the next day was a story planted saying that, oh, they discovered that there's money missing in OPIC and they are holding me liable for it. This was last year. Immediately, I issued a press release saying that this is not the actual state of what happened at the House. I narrated what happened, and I put it out in the media. I was invited by various journalists to explain what was going on. I gave a sincere and open answer. And then on the 9th of November, something very strange happened. I got back to the House to see a massive number of journalists who, of course, it had become a public interest story, who showed up at the House wanting to find out what was going on. I was sitting in the meeting room, and I heard a loud noise going on outside. So I asked what's going on. I heard that the Speaker of the House himself was stopping the journalists from going into the chamber, saying that they did not invite journalists and they did not want anybody in the House, that nobody should come and see. And that's when I got worried, that this had seemed to be a well-orchestrated drama, a political drama being enacted. Going back to the issues, we got back into the House. They raised queries on the accounts of OPIC. That meeting was attended by my good self. The assistant to the current MD of OPIC was there. The director of finance of OPIC was there. The director of projects of OPIC was there. The internal auditor of OPIC was in attendance. The auditor general of the state was there. Okay, the only person that was not there was the actual auditor that audited the accounts of OPIC. And the director of finance of OPIC said there is no money missing in OPIC. These are the ways we run transactions. These are the issues. These are the facts. The director of projects corroborated it. But the House basically hushed them up and insisted that, oh, they're investigated and there are irregularities that they want to know about.
Right. So if I could just come in, yes. Pardon me. I mean, you've laid out some of these highlights, the high points of the event. Some of the allegations, I mean, border around operation of accounts. Just yes. How many accounts did OPIC operate while you were in charge?
So OPIC is a development company. So we had about 14 projects ongoing. And every project would typically have an operations account, which is basically the account from which we expend, and a revenue account, which is where we receive money from investors and subscribers. So we had roughly about 24 operating accounts in OPIC as at the time I was the managing director. And all these accounts are fully documented. OPIC, being a public corporation, no one single individual controls the accounts. I couldn't sign anything that disburses money without at least 4-5 officers haven't reviewed it, haven't checked off, and haven't signed off on it. So it is impossible for 2 billion naira to be missing in OPIC, according to them, from 2000, and I think they're claiming it's 2017 or 2018, and no one caught it. The auditors didn't catch it. The current administration came into office 2 years ago. They didn't catch it. There's a new MD, substantive MD in OPIC that's been sitting there for 1 year. He didn't catch it. And you're telling me that the House of Assembly that does not have operational control of OPIC suddenly, within a 3-month period, say they caught it?
You know, I think it's always going to be debatable, the role of the State Assembly, I mean, in issues of governance. I mean, yes. You understand their roles essentially.
Correct.
I mean, it's ready to be tested anywhere, just to what extent they have, you know, a right to oversee, as it were, or perform their oversight function. Yes. But regarding those accounts, now, some of the allegations say, you know, the company operates operated, or the corporation operated over 20 bank accounts. In fact, kept 27 accounts with only 11 banks amounting to 117 million naira, just over that, while the remaining 16 accounts, so 11 bank accounts had 117 million naira, while the remaining 16 accounts amount to 608 million naira, and they were embargoed. And those were some of the issues that were quite curious to the State Assembly. What exactly played out there? Over 20 bank accounts, certain amount embargoed, and the rest.
So first, we need to understand the convention of banking in Nigeria. I'm sure if you go check, all of you, you probably have accounts that you don't use anymore, that you've written the banks to close, and the banks drag their feet. I've got accounts that I used when I was in university 25 years ago, that the bank, I've written the bank. Some of the banks are even defunct, and they refuse to close them till today. So some of these accounts are accounts that have been owned by OPIC for over 20 years. And we've written some of the banks and said, we're no longer operating this account, close it. And we've sent them the letters, and they don't close it. So we don't operate those accounts. They're dormant accounts. Okay? The operating accounts are accounts for which you transact on a regular basis. Now, it's typically the convention when a new government takes office, to place an embargo on operations until they've had enough time to review the activities of that corporation and decide, okay, we're satisfied with what's going on here, keep spending. So I'm not part of the current administration, but I would assume that that's what happened, because when I took office, the same thing was in play, where the accounts of OPIC then had been embargoed until I came into office, and then I wrote to the governor asking for approval, and then the accounts were released and we commenced full operations. Okay, now going back to the actual allegation, Chamberlain did mention the issue of 881.5 million naira spent on Mitchell's Residences Hotel. Recently, there was a news story about EFCC breaking into one of the hotels in Abeokuta, and that was one of the hotels they broke into. Mitchell's was an hotel that we built within an accelerated period, because at the time we took office, there was a deficit of top-grade hotels for businesses to patronize in Abeokuta. They just didn't exist. And so the governor, Senator Bikola Amosun, gave us a mandate that as part of the urban renewal agenda, we needed to build a befitting hotel that we could use for state activities, and that we could also use to that we could also commercialize. That approval was issued by the State Executive Council. It was issued with a letter approving the development by the governor of the state. The state actually even provided seed fund to start a project. And then OPIC, being a business, provided the rest of the funds and built the hotel. Now, the assembly challenged and said, oh, we did not seek budgetary approval before we built the hotel. And I did say to them, I said, well, I report to the governor of the state. The governor approved this project. And all the records are there. It is transparent. If you've got a problem with the process, you can make a law, you can press a resolution saying, moving forward, you cannot do this without getting our approval. But you cannot come and then say to me that I, Babajide Odushola, my personal capacity, should refund 881 million naira to the state coffers. Meanwhile, the asset built to that 881 million naira is owned by the state, is being used by the state, and even the legislators themselves patronize the hotel.
So does it? Why did the EFCC break into it if they didn't have any reason whatsoever?
Chamberlain, I am not in government today. You would have to probably ask the EFCC. I understand what I read in the papers was there was some people lodging there that were probably of a criminal nature, and they broke into it. I don't know anything about that, because when we were in government, that could never have happened. But when we were in government, that hotel was one of the most secure hotels, reputable hotels in Abeokuta, where people, companies used to actually shut it down to do retreats. So I was astounded when I saw that report. I don't have the details, and I don't want to speak to it.
You know, the Mitchell's Residences is a big point in this whole, matter. And they say that the funds expended were not allocated in terms or in best budgeting practices. And in fact, I think there's a call that you avail the committee with document in support of all cost lines and revenue on the properties between 2015 and 2020. And I think this forms a core, at least a part of the allegations that have been leveled against you. So in terms of the funds that were expended for Mitchell's Residences in particular, and the way the budgeting happened, what can you say about that?
Again, Mitchell's was developed under a mandate issued by the State Executive Council. a copy was submitted to the House during that investigation. It was developed with an approval, a written approval from the governor of the state, to whom OPIC reports. Now, like Chamberlain said earlier on, the challenge here is, so the fact that it was not budgeted for, does that mean as a business we see a commercial opportunity, we have to first wait until the next budgeting cycle, or wait until opportunity avails us, get to the House, seek approval before we can execute? I don't think the promoters of the founding fathers that created OPIC did not design it to be a parastatal operating that way. And it's a self-funding corporation. It is not.
But, you know, are you saying they're not right if they say you cannot spend on budgeted funds?
I believe that they're wrong. I believe that what it ought to be is we take business decisions. So let me give an example. So every year we prepare our business plan. Well, we prepared a business plan. We prepared a budget based on it. But the state always had a budget envelope. So the state decides that this year we want to have a budget size of 500 billion. Now, OPIC is part of that budget size. But OPIC is self-funding. So if OPIC goes to government and says, okay, we have this opportunity to do a project, a captive project that's going to generate 25 billion, it becomes a problem because they've got to find a way of fitting into that budget envelope. So invariably what happens is that you always have that, should I call it a challenge of how do you fit a business into the budgetary envelope when it is a commercial operation. Okay, so for example, during our administration, we secured a project from family-owned funds. It was a 7 billion naira project to do 1,000 housing units at New Market City. Okay, and that project, it was a nightmare trying to fix it into the budget of a state. And in the end, we had to treat it as an independent contract because it just couldn't fit it. And that's where the problem comes. So if you have an operation, a business operation, and you try to now force it into that box, it becomes a challenge. And let me quickly speak to the last point of 8.2 hectares being sold to a developer. OPIC's law gives us the mandate to deal in real estate, to set valuations for the real estate that we deal in, and to take business decisions that would enable us to make profit. That's what the law says. The state government had a policy where they wanted to encourage commercial enterprise to come into the state. As part of that policy, they granted rebates and concessions to various industries and investors that wanted to come to the state. And OPIC keyed into that. When we keyed into that, Pasiena's group, who are the owners of Reina Ale, approached the state that they wanted to develop malls across the state.
My apologies, sir.
Yes.
Just before we let you go, the contest now is between the operations of OPIC,
yes,
as a state-owned organization,
yes,
and the responsibility of the House of Assembly being like the captain over all of the activities of the state. Now, I'm wondering what you're saying here. What role do you think, in the name of accountability, a House of Assembly such as Ogun State House of Assembly should have on such a corporation as OPIC, if you would recommend from your experience?
For the 6 years I ran OPIC, what was always happening was the House would invite us during the oversight function. They would also attend, they used to come to OPIC, okay? They come in, we present our records, we share with them what we're doing. Sometimes they even say they want to go visit our sites. We take them on our sites. They understand our operations. They review it. They make advice or make comments on what they think we've done right, what they think we should improve, and they move on. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that the House of Assembly is getting into the arena unilaterally on its own.
What do you think is wrong here, really?
First is to say that OPIC, you cannot divorce, you cannot suddenly say that the person, I, as an individual, am liable for the corporate actions of OPIC. It beats all logic.
So where then do you think this is all coming from?
It's a political vendetta. It's basically political theater because these gentlemen clearly have an axe to grind with my principal, the former governor of Ogun State.
Are you then suggesting that they should call him?
Well, if they really believe that there is malfeasance here, since I report to him, they should call him. I dare them to call him and tell him to come and explain why we took the decisions that we took.
But, you know, the chairman of the Committee on Public Accounts said he was very close to operations of some of the things that went on while you were in office. And so he said, look, he has that on good authority as well.
And that's where I said this is a theater of the absurd. The chairman of the committee, who is alleging that monies are being spent, was a supervisor on a project we had in Ipokia, where we had to literally buy everything. We were buying everything in cash from Idiroko. Because there was no bank in Ipokia, there was no light in Ipokia, there was no water in Ipokia. Everybody was being paid daily wages in Ipokia. He saw how we operated. Not only that, when we're building metros, we're working on 24-hour shifts. We had gangs of workers being paid daily wages, working 12-hour shifts, and we had a minimum of 3 gangs every 12 hours rotating in and out of that site. Every member of the state ESCO was part of that project. People in that belt were wondering, what exactly are you guys doing?
So you're saying that if indeed anything untoward happened, then he's complicit as well?
If indeed anything untoward happened, yes, he is, because he was part of that executive council.
Are you still taking legal action?
Oh, absolutely. And my lawyers, Messrs. Oluwadeguru at SAN Chambers and AAA Chambers, are taking legal action because this has done irreparable damage to my person. It has done irreparable damage to my person. I'm a real estate developer. I thrive on my reputation, and this has done damage to it, and I will have to seek for justice in that regard. But while I do that, I'm also concerned about the damage this is doing to Ogun State, and this is doing to OPIC. OPIC is a going concern. We were able to attract investors to partner with us. I remember some of the investors were worried about political interference, and we assured them that OPIC does not suffer from that. They said by his very actions is undoing all the progress that was made in 8 years of governance of Ogun State, and is setting booby traps for the current administration that will hamper them in generating new investors into Ogun State. Because nobody is going to come to a state where, for political drama.
All right, we'll have to wind down. So does that suggest that you have the nod of your principal at the time to go ahead with this legal action?
My principal is a chartered accountant of renown. He's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Accountants. I had 2 commissioners of finance who were chartered accountants. By this allegation, they're basically saying that we are all culpable. And I know him as a man of honor. He will not accept that someone is actually impugning his integrity and the integrity of his team.
All right.
Without evidence.
Well, as we said at the opening sequence, we did reach out to the State's Assembly. They say, well, they've got some training that it has to be done, but we're hoping that they will be here
Chairman, sorry
as
to
well.
interrupt you, and please, I'd like you to ask them to send you a copy of the report. If they do have a report, they should send the report to the governor, the current governor.
Do you have a copy yourself?
No, I've never seen this report. I've never seen the allegations. I never saw the evidence. I never saw any smoking gun. And I would love them to present. They shouldn't present it to me. They shouldn't present it to us. They should present it to the whole of Nigeria. And when they do that, they should also make public the record of proceedings that validates the position that they have taken.
We'll keep asking them to see if they will respond and refer to some of these matters that have been raised. But we do thank you for coming on this morning, Mr. Babajide Odusolu, former Managing Director of OPIC. We will be back in a moment. Don't forget, we're keeping an eye on what will play out at the UNGA. Don't forget about COVID as well. All of that and more in a moment. Welcome back. Well, yes, focusing on some activities that will play out at the UNGA. So just to give us some background, how do these things happen? How did they get to some of these decisions? What should we expect moving forward, just ahead of the president's speech? We've got His Excellency Ambassador Joseph Ayalogo, former permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, also former Nigeria's ambassador to Switzerland. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. So could you just unmute so we can hear you? We still can't hear you yet. Okay. All right. So could you go ahead and tell us? I mean, the president will be addressing the UNGA, but we've seen him. He's met with the DG of WTO, who herself has been advocating that she'd like to make Nigeria and South Africa vaccine production hubs. So clearly, the vaccine inequality distribution is topmost on the agenda. I think we may have lost him, but we'll try and get that back. Okay, let's just double check on that. Can you hear us this now, sir? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, that's
Yes,
right. Yeah, we can hear you now. All right, we're just trying to lay some background as to what to expect. I mean, different countries or regions, if you will, they come with what topmost, what they like to see addressed. But we also know some of the big ones, sometimes, I mean, most times, usually muscle their way through. But with this global epidemic, is there a chance that you could see most countries, if not all, be on the same page about ensuring that this vaccine inequality, which the president is supposed to speak about, is addressed at the UNGA?
Yeah, thank you, Chamberlain. Well, there is an increasing awareness now that this pandemic is not just about the rich doing their thing and the poor managing themselves and the devil take the hindmost, because it's a global thing and the solution has to be global. I think that was captured sometime early this year when the G7 meeting held in the UK. It led to pledges of vaccines. I think they came up to 1 billion. I don't know whether they met it, but at least it underscores that two things: there is a need to support the developing countries and the underdeveloped in getting them to have enough vaccines, and then there is also the need to have this vaccine delivered, because the mechanisms for delivering is even as tough as getting the vaccine themselves. So I expect that at the UN there will be this will be moved further, and there could be more specific pledges or commitments which you can hold on to countries.
You know, there are those who speak about, pardon me, there are those who speak about what really goes on with these big pharmaceuticals and how they want to ensure that certain things, pan out in their favor. Would it be fair to suggest that those leaders will definitely take certain policies that will be in the interest of those big pharmaceuticals that perhaps are domiciled in their countries, and perhaps that, who knows, may be detrimental to other countries who are not as well endowed?
Well, there has to be some balance. The pharmaceutical companies, the big ones, that they want to make money, and they want to make money and they will try to make some money. But the point is that their countries will insist on not making too much money and ensuring that as much as possible, let's get as much enough vaccines around so that people who need it can use it. After that, then you can make money. But for the present need, it's important to get vaccine as wide as possible to many users. I think that's what the DG of the WTO is pushing for, and that point must be made at this current UNGA going on.
Well, from where you sit, would you say that the collaborations or the intention, the plans to ensure equitable distribution of vaccines have worked or not? Because I remember a little over a year ago, September 5 or so in 2020, the vice president at a meeting was quoted as saying that Europe should work closely with Africa to ensure that when a vaccine is finally deployed, it should not be on the basis of the highest bidder, but rather be made available at an affordable and in an accessible manner. That was September last year. It was like almost like saying, this was going to happen if we didn't get ahead of it. And that was last year. This quote was made as a meeting to ensure that what is happening now is not what should be happening. Would you say that plan that the world engaged at the time, the Gavi collaboration and all, would you say it has failed, or it's just work in progress?
Well, yes, I would say it's work in progress. You know, the pandemic came on to societies and countries of a sudden, and efforts were rushed towards quickly to try to have some solution. And at the outset, it was like everyone to himself, God for us, well, how they say God for all of us. But then it's becoming obvious that because of the global nature of the world community, you can't sort yourself out and leave the other person. There has to be movement. As part of the movement of people and goods. That's all part of globalization, and that also spreads COVID. And so a lot more is, there is an emphasis now, a growing emphasis on making sure that the have-nots do get to have the vaccines. That's the trend. And so I would say it's a work in progress.
But then that also raises another challenge. I mean, just as you have said, and it's only common knowledge for humanity, you don't have fire at home and help your neighbor to put out its fire. You want to first of all, address whatever it is that you have, that you are dealing with on your own. That's what happened when India said, you know what, we're going to hold fire about exporting. Let's address our issues at home first. One would have thought that by now, Africa, continental Africa, the entire Africa, should be able to have a position where we say we should have the capacity to produce our own vaccines. It's not for lack of potential, it's not for lack of capacity, it's not for lack of knowledge or skills. What, in your opinion, is the shortfall?
Well, I would say that for some time and for some reason, there is a feeling that Africa is slightly immune from the ravages of COVID, and there has been some lack of political drive to do what you were talking about, which is what is needed. Both for vaccines and for upscaling the healthcare facilities that the pandemic has brought about. But it's growing, the pandemic is spreading, and it's obvious that African leaders can no longer sit back on their haunches and say that expect that this will blow over and not touch Africa. It's coming on. This is the time really to key into all options, all opportunities to ensure that vaccines and, of course, other things that are associated with dealing with COVID is put into place. And as an occasion like this, gathering of world leaders in New York is one that should not be missed. And I personally would urge that we do not let the developed countries get away with, not playing an active role in this matter. It's our problem at the end of the day, and we have to push it. So it's really best that we tag along what Dr. Kojo Weller has said and support her in driving the political will to work and get the vaccines to the continent much as is needed.
I know our correspondent, our State House correspondent, Gloria, has also told us about planned meetings, after this one, with other world leaders regarding vaccines and the rest. But I'd like to get the benefit of your experience at the UN. A lot has changed, really. COVID-19 being one of them. And there will always be questions about just how much commitment the UN can get from these leaders to ensure that what is discussed at the General Assembly, or at least the major issues have some sort of resolution that can be implemented or implementable across countries. So your time there and now, how would you say the UN has changed much? Would you say it still holds that power to get the commitment of nations to, I don't want to say to force nations, but at least to ensure that things are done the right way?
Well, of course, the UN is changing with the times, and the current demand of the time is that COVID is wildfire that has no friends, has no borders, and that if you want to ensure that your country is safe in spite of all efforts that have been done at the developed world to produce vaccines, that you cannot ignore the needs of these countries that are developing and do not have the capacity or even the will to push for vaccines. So what I would say is that the UN usually rises to the occasion once it becomes clear that these are the emergent demands, emergent challenges, and there's no doubt that everybody has now, at this point in time, seen the damage, the potential damage and calamity that COVID-19 has become. So I would be hopeful that they will do what they have been able to do in the past.
Let me take this from another perspective, or just restate this in a different way. So you have countries dealing with a public health emergency, as it were. Yes, some countries are even stockpiling for a possible booster jab, a third dose, while a lot of other countries don't even have a first dose, for their citizens. And the WTO DG did reference that 90% of Africa does not have vaccines, while majority of other countries have gotten their full dose. So that's what countries are faced with, both on the two divides, if I could just use that. But then how powerful is the UN to prevail on the countries that have the ones that have more than enough, as it were, to essentially democratize this and ensure that the other countries that don't have access? How powerful is today's UN to prevail on those countries?
Well, they are powerful enough, but I think in practical terms, really, if the countries of Africa and the other developing countries realize that they really need to deal with this matter, and then proceed to get the political will to push the other countries, to push the UN, there will be a lot more success. But what they should avoid is this tendency to be laid back about it, because the others are solving their problems. And you have to make sure that everybody knows that you understand that this is also your problem, and then begin to make demands or negotiate arrangements and so on. So the political will is very important for Africa to push. And once they do it, there are also options to consider. There are this option of producing the vaccines in Africa. There are countries like Nigeria, South Africa, where there is some capacity at least. It's just a matter of boosting the capacity and then use it in producing the vaccine, just as we produce other medications in the country and in continent. We just demand and arrange and negotiate for the capacity to do that. So I would say that with very strong political will on the part of Africa, a lot more can be done.
Dr. Okonjo-Iweala was talking about how sad it is that it's just 4% of Africa that has been vaccinated, and this vaccine inequity is unacceptable. She's, really doing a lot to change it. But being in her position as WTO DG, how, how influential, or can we leverage on that to ensure that certain things tilt? Because she's already spoken about how Pfizer is already talking about investing $100 million in South Africa for this purpose, and now they're looking at Nigeria, so that those pharmaceuticals need to now go to countries and seek how they can invest. So should we be optimistic that we are there as WTO? It could tilt certain things in our balance, in our favor?
Well, clearly, Dr. Kunjawal is a strong voice internationally, and she heads a very key international agency that manages world trade. So it's good that she's taking up the gauntlet, and it's part of her, put this policy on the front burner. And I don't think anybody else can do it any better. She is a stakeholder in Africa's development. She occupies a place, and heads an international organization that manages trade among nations. And the issue of vaccines also has a lot. The trade and commerce is part of it, really, because once you convince a producer that, look, you're not going to lose so much by supporting a project in Africa, then it sticks. So I am very hopeful. In fact, I'm very happy that she's taking that up as one of her key policy trust.
It's interesting. You've mentioned political will twice, Your Excellency. I'm just wondering what else it will take. But my colleague Maokwe has a question or two for you in Abuja. Maokwe.
Thank you, Ayo. I wanted to find out in what language Africa should be couching its requests now that we say, or this talk of equitable vaccine distribution. We do know that the language for Africa has since changed from aid to that of trade. However, do you see that coming in here? Because some people are saying they're not quite sure in which language this is. Are we asking for aid, or are we asking them to come and invest in setting up, let's say, vaccine production plants in Africa? What exactly should we be asking for?
Well, we should be asking for whatever is possible. Both trade, both aid, both and commitments in, aid and trade. These are the two key things, and then raising our capacity to, showing that we have an interest, and that what we only need is the capacity to do our vaccines and so on. The diplomats know how to put pressure when they go to the UN. I expect that they will do that. It's actually the best forum to put the political pressure that is needed to drive this kind of expectations from producers, because they listen to their presidents and prime ministers and so on. So once it's agreed, once it's hyped up enough at the World General Assembly, then it's a matter of how you follow up your own need. If Nigeria decides that, and should decide, because we have the largest population in Africa, that this is a menace for us, a health menace, and then put it on our front burner. That anybody you're talking to, you are demanding this or asking for that, because it's better to ask more for support in giving you the capacity to have your own. Because once you have it now, you can continue to use that capacity for so many other, maybe not pandemic, but so many epidemics and so many other health-related issues. So that's my thinking.
Well, while we wait to see, just precisely how the president makes the case for Africa, there are also questions as to how, not just Africa, but I guess more specifically Nigeria. There have been questions as to how even the vaccines that have been given to Nigeria and in a number of other African countries under the COVAX scheme has been taken up. We've seen that in recent times there have been an increased enlightenment drive, within Nigeria more specifically. In some instances, states are beginning to put in some measures to, well, not coerce, but, to mandate people to, take up the vaccines. Do you think that there's enough convincing of the people of Africa that this is actually priority enough for the president to be pushing at an occasion like UNGA?
Well, I should think that with what damage COVID has done in terms of, deaths and debilitating diseases that arise from COVID, that it's becoming obvious that this should be on the front burner of every African country, Nigeria especially. We like I said earlier, there is some lethargy about, or rather some cavalier attitude about the COVID. They think it's not for us. There are also some analysis, the heat kills it and all that. But we've seen that, obviously, that these are all false presumptions, and that we should be very serious about it. And I tell you that once we begin to take it serious and then watch what other countries are doing or have done and pick up from there, then we'll be helping ourselves quite a lot. We'll be doing ourselves what should be done, at least to make sure that the pandemic, the ravages, do not really affect us that much, because there are various strains coming up now. There are various strains, and you never know when a strain that is very debilitating in Africa would be upon us.
All right, then, Your Excellency Joseph Ayalogo, former permanent representative to the UN and former Nigeria's ambassador to the Switzerland. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you.
All right, we're back in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. Well, yeah, still speaking about COVID-related matters. Dr. Ikeya Tinko joins us now. He's a former executive member of the Nigerian Bars, the Nigerian Medical Association. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Listening to that report, several matters that were raised there that you just can't deal. First, they talk about vaccine racketeering. They talk about people who are trying to sell fake COVID vaccine cards. And then the fact that there could be, or is also being talked about, how traveling, being vaccinated could be one of the requirements. And then this one, discrimination against the kinds of vaccine that you have taken. I mean, in Africa, 4% being vaccinated. Then you even talk about, no, you haven't taken this type. If you've taken this type, could you shed some light on how this comes across to you as a physician, hearing all of this, while also thinking that, look, there's a COVID-19 virus that needs to be addressed. Now, countries have been talking about the Delta virus, which they say is ravaging children. What's your impression of this?
Good morning, Chamberlain. Thanks for the opportunity. Sincerely, it's a very challenging situation for us in Africa generally, and especially our country, Nigeria. I can't imagine where people who know the severity and the seriousness of the COVID-19 pandemic will be racketeering vaccines and they're racketeering cards for people who ordinarily haven't been vaccinated, but they want to present cards of vaccine. It is criminal, it's unacceptable. And anybody who is caught doing that, in fact, that person is posing some national health security and ultimately posing a challenge to the national security, so to speak. And so anybody, I think, any right-thinking Nigerian will frown at it or should frown at it. And if anybody has engaged or had engaged in it, that person should, by all means, desist from it, because it is very, very dangerous. And again, the world will not take it lightly, because the slogan now is that nobody is safe until everybody is safe. But once countries have been vaccinated, all those upper economic countries or higher income countries like America, the UK, Europe, who are doing so much, they vaccinated over 70% of their populace. And in fact, what they are moving forward tonight, that anybody coming to America must have a vaccine shot. And of course, what they have there is the Moderna vaccine. That's just one dose. So it's easier for them, to vaccinate people. Unlike us here, who are relying on the AstraZeneca that has to do with 2 vaccine doses. So I think we should frown at it, and the law enforcement agents should, by all means, track down those people doing these things and make sure that they face the full wrath of the law.
Can this kind of thing even happen without medical personnel being involved in one way or the other?
It's possible that it can happen without medical personnel. Again, it's also possible that medical personnel are getting involved. You will recall that doctors are not on ground, they're on strike. Unfortunately, nothing is being done to see that these things are curbed or nipped in the bud. And so I don't see how there will be much of supervision, so to speak, as regards those other medical personnel who are doing this vaccine. But like I said, let me say that our nurses are on ground and they are doing a yeoman's job. Especially they are the very significant, proportion of medical workers who are seeing to this vaccination, with a little bit of supervision from doctors. But people may just print out cards, there's fraud everywhere, and then begin to sell cards. But unfortunately, they don't know that those cards have barcodes. But once you go and get a card that is not properly vaccinated, and they scan the barcode and you're not caught up in the air, of course, you'll go in for it. But you can never tell who is doing it or who is not doing it. But crime is not specific to any set of people. But I think any medical personnel who knows his or her onions will not indulge in a vaccine or card racketeering in this pandemic.
No, the interesting thing is, we've seen this across different climes in the US, China. They found fake, in the EU as well, talk about fake COVID-19 certificates, fake barcodes and the rest. And just like you said, crime does not really have boundaries. But, localizing it yet again, you've referenced the strike, the strike by resident doctors. Johesu is also sort of up in arms. The NMA, as it were, is also saying that, well, I wonder how many days we have till the end of the ultimatum that they gave earlier on. So clearly we have our own local challenges. And I know that this is perhaps something that we saw coming already. But in terms of the effect of the strike, first, on our fight against COVID, I'd just like you to touch on that one, because I think it's quite important. So we have resident doctors on strike. Just how has it been fighting this war in terms of vaccination and treatment without the resident doctors?
Of course, it's sheer suicide. It's sheer suicide that the government, the country, will live in the face of a full-blown war, will allow the military, so to speak, that are waging this war to be off their duty post. I can't understand it in the life of me that doctors in a pandemic are on strike. And in fact, there's a lot of gerrymandering by government and their officials going to court, getting interlocutory injunctions, instead of sorting out very germane issues that doctors are talking about. And let me tell you, people are dying, both from pandemic and from the non-pandemic causes of death. In fact, last week, I lost a loved one owing to this strike in Benin. He had a stroke, ordinarily would have been sorted out easily in any of the teaching hospitals. But you see, they had nowhere to take him to. And unfortunately, doctors were on strike. That man died. And let me also shock you. Even when he died, they had no space in the morgues to deposit his corpse. All the morgues were filled. And when you have a system where the morgues are filled, it's not a good one. That means people are dying on a moment-to-moment basis. And government should, by all means, whatever it takes, come up this gerrymandering, especially the Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment, our very own dear Dr. Chris Ngige, and also Dr. Honore, the Minister of Health. these things are suicidal for any country to engage in. Whatever it takes to get doctors back to work should be done. And also, unfortunately, these doctors, as we speak, even when they call off this strike, you have less than maybe 50% of them, because most of them are disillusioned and would have left the country to other shores where countries are looking for them. So I don't understand why even Mr. President had told the key actors in this strike, please, whatever it takes, take off all technicalities. But you know what? I think nobody respects authority. So the Honorable Minister of Labour, the Minister of Health, I can tell you this strike is on their desk. Whenever they want to fix it, those doctors will come back.
I don't know if you can give Nigerians, I mean, more insight into just what you're going through as a doctor and perhaps other doctors in the current health system which we have in Nigeria. I mean, you've referenced the strike and the rest. We started the program by talking about the police and how it's important to ensure welfare for them because, I mean, they are essentially on the front lines in terms of crime fighting. Doctors as well on the front line in terms of, you know, medical emergency fighting. So help us understand how it is as a medical practitioner working in Nigeria's health system today.
Well, the simple word is that it's a disaster working in Nigeria as a doctor. It's a complete disaster because you don't have what to work with. You don't have equipment. You don't even have enough personnel to man the so-called stations where you work. So one doctor does over 1,000 persons work. And at the end of the day, there's burnout, and then they don't get properly remunerated. Allowances are abysmally low. I don't know. There's need for a revamping, there's need for a resurgence, there's need for some reawakening of the Nigerian state as regards their health. Because it's only a healthy country that can be wealthy. And for as long as we don't appreciate our health, I think we're jokers. There's no wealth coming from anywhere. For me as a doctor, let me state it categorically clear that what takes me home does not keep me by the bus stop. Before it gets to me, it's finished. Of course, you know, it's no joke. It's no fast. There's no lie about it that you leave here today to Saudi Arabia, you are 6 million naira richer a month later. You are in Nigeria. Even the doctors were not paid last month's salary. Doctors have not been paid salary for almost of 20 months in this country. You know, allowances are not paid, salaries are not paid. How do you want them to work? And then to even add salt to injury, you go to court to get an injunction to tell hungry, angry doctors to go back to work. Of course, you're asking those hungry, angry doctors to go and pose a very serious menace to the Nigerian patient. So the whole thing is a closed-loop system. When once you fix the doctor, you fix the health workers, you fix the health system, I tell you, Nigerians will become healthier and Nigerians will become wealthier as well.
Well, at the moment, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is working on trying to see how she can turn the eye of those big farmers to invest their infrastructures, at least have investments in the country such that they can produce those vaccines locally. She talked about the success in South Africa, and Nigeria happens to be next. So doesn't that suggest that there will be light at the end of the tunnel, should that happen?
Well, obviously that should be. There should be light at the tunnel, at the end of the tunnel, if we begin to produce vaccines. And let me also state it here that even the so-called vaccines, Nigerians are critical key role players in the discovery of the vaccines in the US. In fact, it's even a schoolmate of mine who discovered that vaccine. Why? Because he's working in a clime where he's been given everything to function. So it's not rocket science to produce vaccines. And Nigerian doctors are particularly, especially capable, to do whatever it takes to produce vaccines and even to excel in other health endeavors. But if you don't have the enabling environment, you don't have the enabling welfare setup. I hope if you don't have an enabling environment, it will not work. So whilst they look forward to bringing vaccine production in Nigeria, they should also look forward to the personnel, the doctors, the health workers, who will be key actors or who will play key role in the vaccine production. But I hope that once all these things are looked into, definitely there will be light at the end of the tunnel.
Dr. Tinko, speak to some of the issues, raised in that report that we saw earlier. I mean, the core issue of this conversation we're having. On the one hand, there are issues around vaccine racketeering. We began the conversation with that one. Then there is the compulsion for anyone to take the vaccine before you can go outside the country. You need to have a valid vaccination card that, as you said, has a barcode. And then there is the issue of vaccine hesitancy. Looking at the homily, what would you say of our administration of the entire process? Because vaccine hesitancy has its roots in history. This vaccine racketeering is something that we all know is already happening. And then that compulsion that take the vaccine or you can't travel abroad. People want to travel abroad and they don't want to take the vaccine. What do you think is wrong here? What do you think we may have missed? Is this something localized to Nigeria, or is this something that is a global concern that needs to be addressed as such?
Well, I think it's something of global concern. But in specifics, when it has to do with Nigeria, much of the problem is this social media disinformation, where people, they bandy a lot of rumors. That this vaccine is a sign of 666, 5G. If they give it to you, your immune system will rapidly degrade. If you want to make heaven, you don't want to take the vaccine. And so there's need for serious sensitization. You need to have to sensitize people. Faith-based organizations and their leaders should see to it that they sensitize their members and their followers to go and take the vaccine, because there's nothing, in fact, people are even saying that those who took the vaccine will die in 2 years. So that means Dr. Tinko will die in 2 years. Or maybe if you have taken it, you will die in 2 years. So these are very wrong information in the social media space. And the Ministry of Health, the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, and even the healthcare practitioners, when we become full-blown after this strike, should begin to sensitize their patients, sensitize Nigerians that this vaccine is safe. Because if you have seen one with COVID, it's a challenging thing. I almost lost a close relative from COVID. And you can imagine what we went through to save that woman's life. So until it hits you, you won't know the seriousness of the problem. But like I said, the hesitancy is about this social media, this disinformation in the social media space. And as such, once Nigerians begin to send out.
Yeah, Dr. Tinko, my apologies. There are a number of other realities that are being bandied, even from in official quarters. You may want to speak to that. The fact that there are those who say that this vaccination may be something that has to be done on a regular basis, on a yearly basis. And there are those who are afraid of anything that looks like a needle near their body. So speak to that one. And then the fact that there are also concerns that a number of other variants of COVID-19 will arise that, the current vaccines that we have may not be efficacious against. Those concerns are there. Do you think they are genuine enough for people to say, no, I'm not going to take it, or the concerns are just over-bloated?
In fact, it is those concerns that should make people run and get vaccinated. Because you find a virus that is rapidly mutating. So the earlier you vaccinate against the current strain, then the better the control of the pandemic. But if you keep staying away and then it mutates and then you catch a mutant strain, of course, the vaccine that would have saved you will no longer be effective. But the earlier you vaccinate and then the whole population is vaccinated and nobody is now at risk of severe COVID-19 virus infection, the better for the populace. The needle stick injury is a necessary evil. Everybody must get a needle stick. At one time or the other has had a needle stick experience, so to speak. Not necessarily an injury, a needle stick experience where you need to take injections, you need to take medications via parenteral routes. So I don't think it should be a problem, and it's a one-off thing. You take it, and then that is it. And it's not even painful, very little. The needle is very tiny. You don't even know when it sticks into your skin and it's out. So I don't think that should be a problem. We should rather spur Nigerians to go and get vaccinated. Imagine if over 200 million Nigerians have gotten this vaccine. We will be sleeping with our eyes closed. But the next man who hasn't been vaccinated can pick up a strain, and then will be a good milieu to, disseminate that strain to those who have been vaccinated. But like I said, or like it is said, once you are vaccinated, you are at less risk of having severe COVID-19 infection. So morbidity and mortality will reduce significantly.
But then there's also the concern that a number of people have, and I think that's one of the reasons that some people even, backed off at some point, because we didn't have enough, vaccines. So what if I take one, and then by the time I'm supposed to take the other one, the second jab is not ready or it's not available in country? What happens to me? How do you address that concern?
I don't think that's a very germane or genuine concern, because once you are given a shot, then it presupposes that no one else can get a shot except you, can get a second shot except you, vis-a-vis the batch number of the vaccine. Like when I had my vaccine in April, the next one was to be, I think in June, July. And by the time I came back, it was given based on the last batch. And by the time you take your second dose, that batch expires. So that concern shouldn't even come. The only concern that I see here is that there are not enough vaccines, to go around the whole country, around Nigeria as we speak. And the COVAX initiative had done so much, but again, they are also reliant on those Western countries to give them. And I won't give you until I've sorted out my people. So Africa is in their stress as far as this COVID-19 vaccination is concerned. And that underscores the importance of why we should begin to look at local production of vaccines so that we can have vaccine sufficiency.
Another area of concern that have been raised over time, and it's still something that's quite germane, and the primary healthcare agency also raised it, and that's the fact that there are some people pandering fake vaccines around. And so while there are official places where people should go take these vaccines, there are those who are just desperate to want to take it, and they go to the wrong places, take the fake ones and all of that. So that's another concern, isn't it?
Well, I just got to know that people are, giving fake vaccines. Well, I think if Nigerians know the seriousness of the COVID-19 pandemic, they won't do this. And again, it also shows this incoordination, so to speak, in the vaccine delivery in the country. People should go to designated centers and take vaccines. And those centers are all there, for anybody to see. Hospitals, there's National Hospital in Abuja, Maitama, the Primary Healthcare Center, CBN Clinic. So they are designated hospitals. And if you go to any hospital that is not giving the vaccine, they will direct you to where the vaccine is being offered. So the issue of maybe fake vaccine, maybe patent medicine vendors looking for ways to, make money. But these monies are illicit money. So I don't think it's good. It's very dangerous. And anybody caught doing such a thing shouldn't be spared by the law, sincerely speaking, because that is criminal. And then it poses serious threat to our national security.
All right, Dr. K. Atinko, former NMA executive, thank you very much for your time and thoughts this morning, and well done.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So some messages now.
This first one comes from Festus, who's talking about the COVID-19 vaccine distribution, that the rich countries are cornering available COVID-19 vaccines, and over 50% of their citizens have been fully vaccinated, will not make them safe from the disease, because the more the poor countries are left unvaccinated, the more transmission and deadly variants the world will have to deal with, because COVID-19 does not respect borders. In the meantime, Africans must continue to wear face masks and search for alternative to vaccines.
I really appreciate this mail from Sam Omoru. He tries to give a real-life example. Says, I took my second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine over 2 months ago. I have not been able to convince my wife to take the vaccine. She's listening to all types of conspiracy theories. I'm considering enforcing the operation. Show your green vaccination card in the house. No vaccine card, no entry into the other room, he says.
I think for this reason, I'll ask Malpe to take the next mail. Malpe. Well.
Well, what God has joined together. I don't know if vaccine will put apart, but let's look at this one. From Henry. Henry says, talking about NARD strike and COVID-19 vaccination, says resident doctors are neither vaccinators nor charged with supervision and control of vaccination in Nigeria. However, medical residency training obtains in almost every nation on earth. How are theirs regulated and resourced? Let me remind Nigeria that today is day 52 of the strike. What a shame.
Wow.
Those are Henry's thoughts, not mine. That's what he's written out. And really, we need to think about it. 52 days, and we've left out a very significant cadre of, as the doctor puts it, of our military force in the healthcare sector. You know, we've left them out of the hospitals, and we're not bothered that they're not back. Let us hope that it's a source of concern to those who are concerned.
Yeah, that's it as well, Mark. We want to thank everyone for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Kayode Kikude.
I'm Ayo Makine. Have a wonderful day.